Question number 4 goes like this. I was waiting for the explanation of the command, stay away from people like this, when I was watching your teaching on 2 Timothy 3:5. It sounds intolerant for these days, but does it mean to expel them from the church? Now, I actually didn't say that in my video. I believe the video he's referencing on 2 Timothy 3:5, which is why I believe he's asking. But if you look at this verse in context, it talks about people who have the appearance of godliness, but deny its power. Whoops. Let me try that again. So let's just read a little bit of context of 2 Timothy 3:5 so I can answer this question. The question is, does it mean, 2 Timothy 3:5, that we should expel people who deny the power of God from the church? My contention in the video that this individual is referencing is that this verse where Paul talks about those who have the appearance of godliness but deny the power of God, in this verse, he's not talking about people who deny spiritual gifts or miracles or healings. I am a charismatic, whatever that means. All I mean by that is I believe that spiritual gifts and healings and miracles still take place. I don't believe that those things have ceased to exist in the church, as some people believe. But contextually, I don't think that that's what this is talking about. I think if you read this in context, what he's talking about is the power of God to transform a life, right? He's talking about, understand this, in the last days, there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable. You get the picture. Without self-control, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. And if you read this in context, what Paul's talking about is previously the genuine transformation that salvation brings. People aren't like they were before. When someone comes to know Christ and they get filled with his Spirit, they're not this type of person anymore. A treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lover of pleasure, who doesn't love good and who has no self-control. That's not the description of a genuine Christian. That is the description of someone who may have the appearance of godliness, but denies its power. Denies its power. The power of God that really matters the most is the power to transform you and I from wretched fools who are sinful and fallen into people who can actually manifest the love of God in this world, who can actually partake of the divine nature, not through any act or ability or not because of anything we do, but because of his goodness, his power, and our faith. Somehow he takes wretched sinners, makes us sons, allows us to partake in his divine nature, and allows us to reveal him to the world. That's the picture of a real Christian, not a selfish lover of pleasure. And those who deny that, deny the power of God. So it might seem intolerant for today to say that you shouldn't fellowship with people who aren't living an authentically Christian life. Paul says right here, avoid such people. Avoid such people. He goes on, for among them are those who creep into households and capture weak women burdened with sins and led astray by various passions. Yeah. He ends up comparing them to Jannes and Jambres, who opposed Moses. Those are the two magicians in the Exodus story who opposed Moses at the beginning of his back and forth with Pharaoh, in case you didn't know that. In Jewish tradition, that's who they are. When Moses made his staff into a snake, they made their staffs into snakes. Moses' snake ate their snake, but that's who those individuals are. So we see this all through the New Testament. Don't allow people in the church who call themselves Christians, but who live immoral, sinful lives. There are many, many verses about how to reprove a brother or sister who's living immorally, how to exercise church discipline. First, you go to them privately, then you go with witnesses. Then if someone still won't be reproved, humble themselves before God and the church and get the sin out of their lives, then you rebuke them in front of everyone. And you do that so that they can be restored, hopefully, and so that everyone else can be warned. And at that point, if someone still won't listen, still won't repent, still won't change, you expel them from the church. The problem is, and the reason this is so difficult, is because there isn't one church anymore. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of churches in Protestantism. There's over 40,000 denominations. That doesn't count all the non-denominational churches. So anytime someone undergoes church reproof, they just leave and go to another church, typically, if they want to stay in the church, quote, in the church. So it's much harder to have this sort of accountability today, I think, than it was for the first, say, 1,000 years of Christianity. But there's no doubt that it's biblical. And there's no doubt that your church, as a local church, hopefully with elders and shepherds and people with gift ministries and overseers, can try to exercise this faithfully. In 1 Corinthians 5, you know what? I'm not even going to put it on the screen. I'm just going to read it to you, and then I'm going to get to the last question because it's a personal one that someone sent in, and I want to make sure I have time for it. In 1 Corinthians 5, Paul wrote to the Corinthians about not having fellowship with sexually immoral people, and this is what he says. He says, I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people, not at all meaning the sexually immoral in the world, or the greedy and swindlers or idolaters, since then you would need to go out of the world. What he's saying is, when I told you not to have any association with people who do immoral things, I wasn't talking about the people in the world. I'm talking about the people in the church. He says, if I would have written to you and told you not to have anything to do with immoral people, I would have basically been telling you that you need to depart from the world. Paul's acknowledging, in order to be in the world, you're going to have dealings with immoral people, but you need to keep the church pure. That's why the next thing he says in verse 11 is, but now I'm writing to you not to associate with anyone who bears the name of brother or sister if they are guilty of sexual immorality or greed or idolatry, if they're a reviler, a drunkard, or a swindler. Don't even eat with someone like that. If they call themselves a brother or sister and they are not willing to submit to church reproof and they're living immorally like this, you can't have anything to do with them. You have to keep the church pure. We are all on this journey together toward Christ, toward perfection, toward being fully and finally redeemed by him one day. And when you let a little leaven leaven the whole lump, which is the context that Paul uses that phrase in, he's talking about keeping the church pure, you run the risk of throwing everybody off base and everybody off kilter. Paul says at the end of this passage, for what do I have to do with judging outsiders? Is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? God judges those outside the church. Purge the evil person from among you. He quotes from the Old Testament.